Hi, it is September 5th, 2023, and today I am going to offer my feedback, my insight, my review of the movie Rebel Without a Cause. This is a classic 1955 movie that I watched last night, starring James Dean, Natalie Wood, Sal Mineo. Um, so I want to preface this by saying that I think this is probably the most incredible movie I've ever watched. I think it completely blew me away. I found some of the themes, some of the subtexts just completely profound and really, really interesting. And the fact that this movie was created in 1955 just adds a whole other level to it. And so I really felt compelled to talk about the movie and to talk about some of the themes and some of the stuff that goes on, uh, and also some of the modern reviews that exist regarding the movie and where I think they've kind of gotten it wrong. So I probably will spoil parts of the movie. So if you haven't watched it, I do recommend that you do so, and you might want to do so before you watch the rest of this video. Although I think you could still watch it after and still enjoy it, and maybe even have a kind of a different viewpoint going in, or when you see it, maybe thinking about some stuff, or if you've seen it before, maybe you'll want to watch it again after hearing this. But so in this movie, we got this guy, Jim, and he is the supposed, rebel without a cause, played by this legendary figure, James Dean. Um, you know, this movie is about, well, first of all, there are two essentially primary categories of desires that humans have. And I talked about this on my blog, which I've now removed, although it probably will be coming back at some point. It's one of those things that right now it's down. But in my blog, I discussed, and I'll say again, that basically there's two types of desires. There's the desire for the fulfillment of ourselves and the desire for the fulfillment of other people who we care about, or animals or beings or whatever. There's the self and there's everyone else, everything else that we care about, right? So um there my belief, my viewpoint is that neither of these should be neglected, that we should both consider our own desires and the desires of other people who we care about. And we should care about people for the most part. We shouldn't be cruel to other people. Essentially, we should at least consider their desires, even if we're not actively working to devote ourselves to the fulfillment of their desires. And so, in this movie, Jim, who is played by James Dean, which is nice and convenient, he exemplifies a person who cares both about his own desires and about other people. So he is both kind and he isn't what I'm probably just going to go ahead and refer to as a bitch. Now, when I say that word, I'm not talking about women. I'm talking about people who neglect their own desires for the sake of going along to get along, right? So his father in this movie very much is portrayed as a bitch, as someone who basically has no resolve, has um, no heart, no bowls, no what's the word? Well, hopefully you get the idea. Um, and so right away, some of the modern critics are saying, "Oh, well, no, his father's how you should be. You should be a bitch. You should just allow your wife to control you and just basically run the show." And I think the reason is because a lot of people act that way. Um, and this isn't a political thing because I really believe that both people on the right and left, many of them act in this way. They go along to get along. They don't really have any true passion. They don't have any true, they're not really working for either. They're not really working to fulfill themselves or to really fulfill other people. I mean, they're doing what other people want because they want to be liked. They're not necessarily doing it because they're driven by true compassion. Because true compassion requires us to do things that other people aren't gonna like. If someone's drinking too much and it's obvious to us, it's not real compassion to be like, "Oh yeah, I don't see any issue with it. You go ahead and drive drunk. You go ahead and, do all these harmful, destructive things. Go ahead, just because you don't want them to be upset with you." That's cowardice. That is being a bitch. And that is a very widespread phenomenon in 2023, as apparently it was in 1955 as well. And so this is going to be all over the place, man. The main woman in this movie, she is portrayed also as a person who cares about her own desires and who is also kind. And so she, to me, is an incredibly strong character. Both of them are, because of that. And now they both have some flaws. At one point, Jim says, "Oh, well, I wish my dad, or maybe he should just, hit my mom one time. Just give her a good beating one time, just so he stops getting pushed around so much." And certainly, I don't support domestic violence. I don't think people should be using violence. I especially don't think that men should be violent towards women. Because they are bigger and stronger, and on the whole, so I don't support that, but I understand the sentiment of wanting to see someone actually stand up for themselves when they've never actually done it. And I understand the frustration someone might have seeing someone just get pushed around their whole life, especially your own father, who theoretically should be some kind of portrait or example of masculinity. So I wouldn't say hit her. I would say, well, you shouldn't marry her. You sure as hell shouldn't stay married to her. But, the cultural norms have changed a bit since 1955. Divorce is a lot easier, a lot more common now. And maybe, domestic violence was more common back then. I don't know. I don't support it, but so it's not like he's a perfect character, and she's also not perfect in that, she kind of admits that, the person I am when I'm around this group of friends isn't necessarily always the real me. So she does have some flaws in that regard, but she there's all these reviews saying that like she's this like kind of whore, basically. That she's, early on in the movie, she's wearing lipstick, and she talks about how her father will rub off her lipstick and not want her to basically present herself as a woman who's a woman reaching maturity, and who men are going to start to find desirable. Now she has this interaction with her father where she's basically trying to get closer to him and give him like a kiss. And this to me, okay, so when I saw this, and then her father reacts very adversely, and he actually hits her. And my thought when I saw this, well, first I'll tell you what the review said, because later I read this review and I was like pretty shocked that someone would actually have this take. But the take that I saw that someone had was that she was somehow trying to like sexually come on to her own father. And that wasn't at all the take that I had or what I saw when I was watching the movie. What I saw was this girl who essentially felt like she had this dad growing up who had as soon as she had reached this age of maturity, had really abandoned her and had stopped loving her and stopped caring about her. See, I think the big theme in this movie, and maybe this is a big theme in our society in general, is that people don't seem to be able to differentiate the idea of love and the idea of romantic attraction. And so, to me, it seems very reasonable that a daughter would want her father to love her, to care about her as a human being, not in any kind of romantic or sexual way, but as a father, as someone who is supposedly, someone who's loved you for your entire life. And so to me, what I saw was she was seeking love from her father, not romance. Now, why did the father have such an adverse reaction? And I think that is the crux. See, I think the father was feeling some kind of attraction or attraction towards his own daughter. And I think it made him uncomfortable. And I don't think he knew what to do with that feeling. And I think that's why he adversely reacted to her seeking affection that had nothing to do with romance. Now, this theme also comes up. So there's this guy, Plato, in the movie, and he is a loner. And he's not just a loner, his parents have essentially abandoned him. So he's got a caretaker who is basically caring for him like a household employee, but his own parents have abandoned him. And not only have his parents abandoned him, but the kids at school don't care for him. He doesn't have any friends. So he's a very sad, very depressed, very lonely kid. And Jim comes along and he befriends the guy. And to me, watching this movie, this had absolutely nothing to do with any kind of gay romantic attraction. This was pure fucking love. This was, I care about a guy who's suffering. And from Plato's perspective, it seemed like here's a guy who actually cares about me, who actually acknowledges me, who kind of almost develops into this fatherly role for him, and who he admires and who he respects. But again, there's a difference between love and romantic attraction. And there was nothing said in the movie that this guy Plato had any kind of romantic attraction towards Jim. And all these modern reviews I'm seeing, they're all saying, oh yeah, there was this clear gay homoerotic subtext. And I'm like, no, actually, I don't think there fucking was. I think it's very possible to admire and respect and love another person without meaning you want to have sex with them. I think that if that's what you're seeing, it's because you in your own life have confounded these two ideas. And, you know, I talked about these two desires, you know, for the fulfillment of the self and the fulfillment of others, compassion for others. Well, I think a lot of people in our society lack that compassion. And because they lack that compassion, they can't comprehend of the idea that you would love and admire and respect someone, and not because you wanted to sleep with them, but just because you felt like they were good and a kind person, and someone you enjoyed hanging around, you know, as a friend. So this, I mean, you know, in my book, I'm writing a fictional novel, and this theme of love versus romantic attraction and why these things are different and how they're different and how one can exist without the other. This is a really big theme in my book. In fact, this is probably the centralized theme in my book. Not to spoil too much, but I think it's a really big theme that people need to learn and understand. So let's see. You know, the most powerful moment in this movie to me. So Jim and this lady Judy, who's played by Natalie Wood, they fall in love, right? And she's talking to him. She says, "You know, what kind of person do you think a girl wants?" And he says, "Well, a man." And when he says that, what he's talking about, he's saying someone who's not a sissy. He says, what is a man? A man is someone who actually stands for something, who actually has courage, who has strength, right? So when he said a man, that's what I felt like he was saying. Well, what does she reply? She says, yes, a man, but not just a man who can be gentle and sweet, who doesn't run away when you want them, like being Plato's friend when no one else would be. So what is that? That's compassion. That's compassion that she's talking about. So again, you go back to these two desires. What is a man? If a man is someone who has courage. So a man will express his own desires, right? He will seek his own fulfillment. However, it's not enough that he's a man. He also has to be a kind man. So he also has to have that compassion, seek the fulfillment of those around him. And so it's a two-pronged test. Jim understands you want a man. But she says, yeah, I want a man, but I also want a man who's a good man. And you're a good man. And I can see you're a good man. Because look at you in Plato. Now, why was this so powerful? It was powerful because she is expressing desire. She is actually expressing something which women simply just very, 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 very rarely do. In 1955, they very rarely did it. In 2023, they very rarely do it. And that is to express her own desires, not the desires as defined by society in 1955, not the desires as defined by society in 2023, not the desires that society says a woman should want, but the desire that she actually has. This is why she's a strong woman. This is what makes her such a compelling and strong character, is that she is willing to express, because there's a lot of vulnerability in this, you know. There's a good reason women don't express their desires, because in both 1955 and 2023, people don't want to hear it. She expresses, what are you? You're a whore. Who are, you know? This is a common thing. If a woman talks about, oh, I want this, you know, they just don't do it unless they're just saying something that fits into what society tells them they need to do to be a good woman, to be a good little girl, right? And she says, no, I'm not going to do that. I also wanted to talk about, you know, this caretaker of Sal's. This is a black woman, man. And she's a strong woman, too. She doesn't have the size of a role that these other characters have. But in the moments that she's there, she is strong. She is outspoken. She expresses her desires for Sal to be safe. And that's powerful too. And it's incredibly powerful when you consider this movie was made in 1955, before the civil rights movement, before the counterculture, before any of the 60s happened. I mean, there's a reason that this guy, James Dean, is a fucking legend, man. And he died before this movie came out. And, I mean, you talk about why did the 60s happen? Why did all these revolutions happen? I gotta think this movie had a hell of a lot to do with it, because I can't imagine the impact it had on me. I can't even imagine the impact a movie like this would have had back then, with some of these things that were covered. So, you know, after there's a moment in the movie where the three of them, they're in this abandoned house, and they're having fun. They're playful. And it's such, they just radiate this pure joy that's based on being around people who actually love them, who actually care about them. And it's something that you just, I can't think of any movie that and look, I'm not a movie buff, and maybe I should become more one now that I've seen this, but I can't think of many times, if any, that I've seen that kind of just pure joy on display in any kind of theatrical form or in real life. I mean, it really is a very heartwarming moment in the movie. So, James Dean died in a automobile accident, age 24. And in this movie, his rival. Now, this is going to be the first big spoiler, so if you've listened up to this point and I've intrigued you, I'd highly recommend turning it off, because now I'm really going to spoil the movie. But his rival dies in an auto crash. So that's in the movie. So that's crazy, right? But then what's even more crazy is when they're in this abandoned house, they're playing in this swimming pool that's got the water taken out of it, and like James like pretends like he falls in or whatever, and Natalie Wood, the actress who plays Judy, she drowned at age 43. In another part of the movie, James and this rival, they're having a knife fight. Well, Sal, the third main character of this movie, he died at age 37 when he was stabbed to death. So, I mean, I don't consider myself a conspiracy theorist, but holy fucking shit, how is that a fucking coincidence, man? I mean, this movie rocked the fucking boat, man. And I think it's gonna be timeless, man, because these themes are so powerful. Um, yeah, that's all my notes. When I was when I was driving to work today, I saw there was some dude. He's pushing a stroller. He's got no shirt on, and his wife's walking next to him. And to me, whenever I see a guy like running around without a shirt on, I just assume he's like very impressed with his own physique, and he's, what we would call peacocking, right? Where he's trying to get attention. He wants people to be impressed with him, right? And I just thought, what a fucking contrast between this guy, this bitch, who is, first of all, disrespecting the woman that he's walking with by peacocking for other people in the community, unless this is something she's into. Which, I mean, maybe. But compared to Jim in the movie, he removes his shirt, but he does it because his friend Sal is cold. And again, it's an act of compassion. It's an act of kindness. Um, so, I guess maybe it impacted me so much because it seemed to me like Jim stood for the things that I stand for in a lot of ways. Like, I seek to be kind, and I seek to be authentic. Um, what was the word? She used sincere to describe him. He's sincere. He's sincere and he's kind. It's a two-part pronged test, right? Well, I'm sincere and I'm kind. But this world hasn't been real kind to me. And this world hasn't been real sincere with me. You know, I go around these women, and it always seems to me like maybe they are attracted, but then whenever I express an interest in advancing our relationship, they seem to just run for the hills as though I'm some kind of creep, or I'm some kind of uh, just horrible person who has done some horrible thing by being sincere. and being what I believe to be kind, because I always think it's kinder to tell people the truth, even if it's a truth they don't want to hear, than it is to tell them what they want to hear because you want them to like you. And in a way, it was validating for me to see a guy who is sincere and who is kind get the woman, right? Because of course he gets the woman, right? So, I mean, I guess it on a personal level, it 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 validated me in some way, um, and it gave me hope, because if the world, if I was designing the world, that's what I would do. I would want women to be attracted to men who are sincere and kind, because I think the world would be so much better of a place if people were sincere and kind. Um, I think that's the kind of behavior that should be validated, that women should admire, even though, unfortunately, I think most people, even though I think if a woman was being honest and she watched this movie, I think a lot of women would say, yeah, I do think he's an attractive character, um, if they're being honest. But I think a lot of women wouldn't admit that because of the implications of what that would mean, and would that make her, not the good little girl that society tells her she should be, and that her friends and her social group and her political party, they tell her that she needs to be. So yeah, man. Really powerful fucking movie, man. And if you got any comments, if you disagree, you want to discuss it, I'm happy to discuss it. I'm not a big movie reviewer, at least I haven't been. So if you just found this video because you're interested in the movie, whatever, hopefully I gave you a little different take than maybe what some of the standard reviewers give you. And that's what it's about, man. It's about being an individual. And I think it's individualism too, um it's expressing my desires. Who am I? Not, what do I think about the movie, not what does every other critic think. Oh, everyone agrees that there's a gay subtext. Well, I don't agree with that. I actually think the movie is a lot more about love than it is about um the romantic attraction between the men. And, it's not to say that romantic attraction between men doesn't exist or can't exist, and that it's not every bit as exciting for men who experience that as it is for people in opposite sex relationships. I just didn't feel like that was a big theme in the movie. I felt like the romance between Jim and Judy was the big romantic theme, and the relationship between Jim and Sal was more of based in compassion. Now, romance also should be based in compassion, and I felt like their romance was based in compassion, but it's possible to separate the two, and I felt like actually the movie did a good job of doing that. And I think my book is gonna do it too. So I guess that's about all I got to say about it, but I did want to put this video out, and thank you for bearing with me. So you guys have a good one.